Technically, Army Men 3 doesn't actually exist as a commercial game. It's an abandoned fan-made game done in Unreal Engine that takes place after the events of Army Men 2, but seems to exclude the events of Army Men Toys in Space. Unfortunately, having been abandoned, this game will probably never be finished, and will stay in a rough beta state forever. That's a shame, too, because this beta is the foundations of a really good game. Certainly better than the garbage that Global Star Software, especially Take-Two Interactive, released once they bought the rights to Army Men. Picking up after Major Mylar's defeat at the end of Army Men 2, this is the fan-made conclusion to what was originally intended to be a trilogy, following Sarge's exploits and culminating with a showdown with the Mad Grey Doctor, who created the zombie experiments. Unfortunately, 3DO never finished that story, opting to pivot to Army Men Toys in Space and Army Men Air Tactics, before shifting their focus to the Nintendo 64 and especially the PlayStation. Unlike the overhead tactics-esque gameplay of Army Men and Army Men 2, Army Men 3 takes a third-person shooter perspective, somewhat akin to Sarge's Heroes, but with a faster-paced feel. Think Gears of War rather than Uncharted. They're both third-person, but one is definitely faster fighting than the other. While the game does follow Sarge's battles, you don't actually play as Sarge. Instead, you play as a green corporal named Wallace Niles, who assists Sarge on his missions, sometimes on the same battlefield, and sometimes in a support role, by handling a task that frees Sarge up to tackle the war's main objectives. The game was in an alpha or beta state when it was abandoned, so unfortunately, only a quarter of the intended campaign is playable. 4, I think, of the intended 16 levels. And what's there, while completely playable and genuinely a lot of fun, can be pretty buggy. The physics feel weird, with bizarre ragdoll effects that would be right at home in a Bethesda RPG, and sometimes it takes the game a good 15 or 20 seconds to realize that you've died before giving you the option to quit the game or reload. It took me probably about an hour and a half or so to get through what of the game is available, so it's not a terribly long demo. But as is the case with the best games, in my opinion, what it lacks in quantity of gameplay, it makes up for in quality. This is one of the most addicting non-commercial fan games that I've ever played. I've seen some on the ModDB forums claim that this is, quote, the best Army Men game ever made, and I'm definitely not prepared to go that far. Army Men 2 and Sarge's Heroes 2 do still exist, but it is a damn good game, and a blast to play. Sound design is a bit wonky, but it's a fan-made game that never got finished and features full voice acting. Wonk is kinda part of the deal. Visually, the game looks pretty good for the most part, but there are some visual and performance issues that crop up here and there. Some of the textures look great, while others look a little bit muddy and blurred. I imagine that a lot of that would have been worked out before a final release had this game gotten one, but as it is, the game is a bit of a mixed bag visually. As for performance, a lot of the game runs very smoothly, but there are times when it gets really choppy and chugs for a second or two. The PC I'm running has an RTX 4090 and a 13th gen i9, so I know this isn't a hardware issue. Despite that though, even with the muddy visuals here and there and the performance problems, there is a ton of fun to be had with Army Men 3, and the missions give you a solid variety of objectives and a huge array of vehicles and weapons to use to shoot, blow up, or melt your tan foes. In addition to the campaign, there's also a skirmish mode that lets you battle in some pretty cool and varied environments that you don't get to see in the short available campaign missions. Army Men 3 is an interesting experience. As a fan-made game, it's an exceptional foundation, but as the project was abandoned years ago, back in 2016, it will never live up to its full and undoubtedly awesome potential. It does have, at least in my opinion, the most fast-paced combat of any Army Men game, and it's a shame that we didn't get to see that fleshed out. If Take-Two would actually do something with the IP, they could look to Army Men 3 for inspiration, and make an awesome budget game to reboot the series. But as that's pretty unlikely, this unfinished and very rough around the edges demo is sadly probably going to be all we have to suffice for a quote-unquote modern Army Men experience. Still, though, it's a free download, and there is no reason not to give it a download and try it out. It may not scratch your itch for a full-blown Army Men experience, but it's a great way to kill a couple hours in the afternoon. My rating for Army Men 3 on PC is a C.